Hey everybody, welcome to the video. Yes, I am back in Florida and there's an empty room behind me. You guys don't have to let me know in the comments. Trust me, I know one day you will get stuff back there, but today is not that day. But we are here talking lineup building for week 12 of the NFL season over on DraftKings, going over cash game and GPP strategy. And if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to take that one step further, become a fish member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. Optimizer, ownership projections, cheat sheets, data sheets, Discord with me, all that fun stuff like can be found down below for the NBA and the NFL. And since we're close to the end of the month, if you do want to sign up and you stay signed up on December 1st, you can get this last week for free if you do want to check it out. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by PrizePicks, just you versus the projections. And as of right now, if you sign up there, you can get a free money bonus up to $100. It's free money. Want to use it to your advantage, when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. And it's really fun. I play on it each and every single weekend. Just fun to play over there, in addition to what you like on DraftKings. Then if they all hit, you can double up your money over there. So if you want to check it out, you know where to find it. But I think that's it for the plugs for the most part. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as I always say, I do not build these lineups for you guys to copy and paste. A lot can change by the time I record and by the time the slate locks. I use my optimizer and things like that. I am simply going over a process I use when I build lineups each and every single weekend, which has worked quite well so far this season. And you guys can apply the same process to your own favorite players and build your own lineups. This is purely just to go over the slate and try to put a lineup together that I think makes sense using a process that I typically use. And as I always say, if we are building for cash games, the first thing I like to do is head right to the running back position because they're the most important players in our lineup. Yes, quarterback, wide receiver, they're important. They certainly are. But running backs are the guys that are going to get guaranteed volume. You want to make sure they're the guys that we want. We don't want some random 4K running back that we hope sees 20% of the snaps. We need guys that are going to play the majority of the snaps. They're in a good spot, good matchup, game script looks good, and all things considered, highly owned, especially in cash games. So we're going to head to the running back position. And there's actually quite a few good running backs this week. I feel like for the past month or so now, we've had some very obvious running back plays, like guys that are going to be extremely chalky. And I feel like that's not going to be the case this weekend. Yes, obviously some guys are going to be higher owned than others, but I think it's going to be quite spread out because I think you can make a case for a lot of running backs in the slate. Like just to run through it really quick, up top you have Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, you also have Austin Eckler and Najee Harris. I assume Christian McCaffrey will be the highest owned of the big name guys just because he's facing Miami. And people are going to be playing Cam Newton, and you can pair CMC with Cam Newton. That's not negative correlation just because CMC is basically a wide receiver 2 out there. Jonathan Taylor will probably pick up some ownership, especially what he did last weekend, but this is a much tougher matchup versus Tampa. And I actually kind of prefer the passing attack for the Colts here, especially Michael Pittman versus Tampa. So if it's me and I'm spending top dollar for running back, especially in cash games, I'm going to go with CMC. His floor is just hard to beat with his receiving upside. Going down the list, though, I mean, you can pretty much name off every running back, and they look pretty good. I think James Robinson is a very strong cash game play on this slate. Very high chance he's in the lineup here as we build. Saquon Barkley's viable versus Philly. A.J. Dillon no longer with Aaron Jones looking likely to play. Darrell Henderson versus Green Bay I think is in a pretty good spot, although I think a lot of people would go with the passing attack on both sides of that game, so there's a chance he could get a bit overlooked, and if that's the case, I do like him in tournaments. You have Myles Gaskin versus Carolina, and then Miles Sanders here at $5,100 should be quite popular, as cheap as he is, versus the New York Giants. There's a couple guys I probably skipped over, just kind of glossing over it quickly, but it's a pretty deep running back slate. And for right now, the first two guys I'm going to plug in, if we can fit in CMC at the end, I would feel absolutely great about that. So I'm going to leave the flex spot open for now. But we're going to plug two guys in. Two that I think are more than likely going to be the highest on running backs. It's going to be close. I think CMC will probably be top 3 alongside these two, who I'm projecting to be the 2 highest on running backs in the entire slate. But the first guy I'm going to plug in, James Robinson, got rid of that questionable tag as the week progressed. He's $6,200. Great matchup versus Atlanta. They've been terrible defensively versus the run this year, and they haven't been that great versus the pass either. But James Robinson pretty much gets all the touches here for Jacksonville. It's never fun playing a Jaguar just because the offense is gross. They usually find themselves trailing, but this is a good spot versus Atlanta because Atlanta has been awful recently, and I think Jacksonville can kind of hang into this game. And if they're not getting blown out, which they shouldn't versus Atlanta, Robinson should hopefully get us around 20 total touches. He is using the passing game, which does help boost his floor. He's only $6,200, which I think is a fantastic price for him. If he happens to fall in the end zone, great. So we're going to plug in James Robinson, liking him quite a bit, and should carry some pretty hefty ownership this weekend. And they also like a very cheap running back in Miles Sanders, who I did talk about. It's just mainly a price thing for me. Plus, the matchup versus the Giants is pretty good. They have not been good versus the run this year. And in his return last week versus New Orleans, they have a very good run defense. Had 16 carries for nearly 100 rushing yards. Only had one target. I wish he'd get more involved in the passing game. But 94 yards on 16 carries versus a pretty good run defense is not that bad. So I think Miles Sanders, if he can get us like 15, 20 touches in this game, hopefully a couple of catches. I'm not going to count on it, but $5,100 will be hard to beat. And plus, there's a lot of good expensive wide receivers on the slate. And if you want to play a guy like CMC or Jonathan Taylor, you have to find some value. And every time we can get cheap value at the running back position, I try to take it because it's just hard to get those kind of touches, guaranteed touches at those price points at any position. So I'm going to plug in Miles Sanders for now. Doesn't feel the greatest. I think in tournaments, it would make sense to be underweight on Miles Sanders, but in cash games, I don't mind eating some cheap volume chalk there at the running back position. So at this point, we can either go with the quarterback position or we can start knocking out some wide receivers. And for me, I think I'm just going to continue with wide receivers, then we'll plug in the quarterback. I think we're going to go cheap with a guy like Cam Newton or maybe mid-range with Justin Herbert. I don't see myself spending up for Jalen Hurts or Tom Brady in cash games. I think they're fine in any other format. I think you can play them in cash games. I just think the more optimal way to go would probably be to save a little bit of money at quarterback this weekend. So let's start with some wide receivers. Obviously, you have the two heavy hitters up top in Cooper Kupp and Devontae Adams. It's only a matter of if you have the money for them, because I'm not going to tell you they're bad plays because they're not. It's just being able to afford them, because you also have to factor in CMC too. Like, it depends. Do you want to spend top dollar for a wide receiver, or do you want top dollar CMC? Because you're not going to be able to play both. I would love to, and I love Cooper Kupp and Devontae Adams in all formats. That game should be awesome. It's the late game, 425 start, and it should be very exciting. If you have those two players, I feel pretty good about it, and they're definitely the highest projected at the position. It's just I don't think this is the best way to go in cash games personally, but in tournaments, like I said, by all means, go for it. You have Justin Jefferson. Deebo Samuel, I think, is a guy you can play cash games versus Minnesota. He has just been fantastic all season long. I don't think you can really argue against Deebo Samuel being a bad play. Keenan Allen, if we play Justin Herbert, I would probably like to get him paired up with Keenan Allen. You don't have to do that, but I do like Keenan Allen, usually one of the safest options each and every single week. But for me, my favorite wide receiver on the slate, and one of my highest projected wide receivers on the slate, not as high as Cooper Kupp and Devontae Adams, but I'm actually projecting him to be the highest owned wide receiver on the slate, and it's Chris Godwin here. $7,000 versus this Colts secondary that really hasn't shown that they can slow down opposing wide receivers so far this season. And Tom Brady should have a heck of a game here versus Indy. This game features the highest over-under on the slate, 53 points. It's only a 3-point spread, 28-point implied team total here for the Bucks. The points got to come from somewhere. And the Colts have been a bit of a pass funnel defense. Not saying Fournette's not a good player or anything. I think he's fine in tournaments, but Godwin and Mike Evans should be able to have a field day here. Evans was questionable earlier in the week, but he's now good to go, which, I mean, it's not a bad thing necessarily. Yeah, there'd be more volume for Godwin if he was out, but it definitely takes a lot more defensive attention off of Godwin and onto Evans because he's a deep threat. Chris Godwin should be able to eat up this secondary, and it feels like he has a good week each and every single week. Like since week 6 versus Philly, where he had 9.3 points, 28, 31, 12, and 19. I think there's a fair price point. He grades out as one of the best point per dollar options on the slate at the position, despite being nearly $7,000, and I want a piece of this offense. I don't think I'm going to play Tom Brady in this exact lineup, so I will try to get a lot of Tom Brady's points through Chris Godwin here. So we're going to plug him in as our wide receiver 1. And at this point, it really just depends on what kind of roster construction we're looking with. Because if we go cheap at quarterback with a guy like Cam Newton, we can afford some more mid-range to expensive wide receivers similar to Chris Godwin. If we play a guy like Tom Brady, Jalen Hurts, we'll have to spend down a little bit to get some more mid-range wide receivers. But if we go to quarterback, so let's just say, for example, we plugged in Tom Brady, that would leave us just under $5,000 left per player, which is not bad, considering we're probably playing the Texans defense at about $2,300. I'm not saying we can't play Tom Brady. I think it's fine, but I think we can save some money, especially in cash games. Jalen Hurts would be similar. So for me, I think Justin Herbert or Cam Newton were probably the two most popular quarterbacks. Justin Herbert, a lot of people are looking at game logs. He went off last week, so I could see his ownership getting bumped up a little bit because of that. And it's a good spot versus Denver just because of the price point. Denver isn't a terrible defense, but don't think they can really stop the Chargers offense. There's just too many good weapons, and Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Mike Williams, and Jared Cook, plus Justin Herbert's one of the best quarterbacks in all of football, and he showed us some rushing upside last week as well, which is really nice, nearly 100 rushing yards. So for me, it's between Herbert and Cam Newton. Just in the specific lineup, I'm going to go with Cam Newton to save some money. It's a great spot versus Miami. They're 27 versus quarterbacks so far this season. And the 2 games he's played this year, didn't start versus Arizona, but he did get some action at 11.72 fantasy points because he had 2 touchdowns. But in his first start, Week 11 versus Washington, 21 for 27, Not a lot of passing yards, but I don't really care about passing yards when it comes to Cam Newton. I just care about what he does on the ground. And he had 10 carries for 46 yards, a rushing touchdown, and 2 passing touchdowns. At $5,600 versus Miami, I would have a hard time seeing him not hit value here. I currently have projected for around 19.5 points, which is the best point per dollar option at the position. And Justin Herbert would be in second. So really, for me, it's between those two. I'm going to plug in Cam. And like I said, if you do play Cam, a lot of times you don't play the same running back on the same team as the quarterback, but CMC is fine with that just because he gets targets and he's basically one of the top options for Cam Newton. So I wouldn't have a problem with that if we do have CMC money at the end of the flex spot. So at this point, we have around $5,200 left for our last remaining spots, which is really not all that bad. So let's just look at some more wide receivers and try to fill out the last two. And we could either go up top, because I think we could afford an expensive one if we wanted to, or we could go more so in the middle. And there's quite a few good mid-range wide receivers I like on this slate. First off, DeAndre Johnson here at $6,600, Cincinnati. Defense hasn't been too kind versus wide receivers this year, but DVOA-wise, they haven't been that great versus the pass, and he just gets volume every single week. Like, since week 6, 13 targets in all but one game versus Chicago, and he stole 11 points in that game. Like, he is going to more than likely get you 10-plus targets each and every single week, and I'm not too scared of Cincinnati's defense. No, it's never fun playing a Steeler, but we know where the offense is going, and it's through Deontay Johnson and Najee Harris with a little bit of Muth mixed in. So at $6,600, I like that price point a lot. You can go around with Deontay in all formats. Brandon Cook should also be quite popular this week, $5,800. There's going to be a lot of Tyrod Taylor and Brandon Cook stacks, which the Jets have been more of a run-follow defense. It's just they don't really have much of a run game. Tyrod Taylor does run a little bit, but then you have David Johnson, and just it's a bit of a mess there. It's not pretty. They did get rid of Phillip Lindsay, so it's more condensed now. Also, Dontrell Hilliard's there, but I would expect Brandon Cooks to have quite a bit of ownership. I'm not scared of the Jets defense. I'm just saying they've been more of a run funnel than they have versus the pass, but not saying they have a great defense. Teams just tend to get up on the Jets quite a bit. They just run the ball down their throats. Can't really see that happening with the Texans. I think the Texans put up some points, so Brandon Cooks obviously should be a part of that. And only 3 targets last week and 2 catches versus Tennessee, which oddly enough was the best matchup you could ask for as a wide receiver because they're giving the most points per game. But it was just a brutal game, his worst game of the season. So I think he's certainly in playing all formats, should bounce back versus the Jets. But the guy I want to plug in is Michael Pittman here at $5,600. I love this Tampa Bay Indy game. I think it's great in cash games. I think it's great in tournaments. There's just so many good options. And look, the Colts, their game plan is to run the football. The thing is, with the Buccaneers, their plan is to have teams throw the ball against them because they always stop the run. Because they're one of their best run defenses in football. They have been for the past couple of seasons. And, yeah, the Colts should still be able to run the ball a little bit. They're probably not going to get like 200 rushing yards, run the ball 40 times, and get 4 rushing touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor should still be fine, but I don't think he's going to hit that ceiling, especially with what he did last week. So Pittman, Tampa Bay's secondary is not that great. He's only $5,600. He's the obvious wide receiver one here. They should throw the ball more than they have been, and they should be trailing. They're 3-point dogs at home here. 53.0 run. I already talked about this tight spread. If it's going to be back and forth, I think Michael Pittman is probably a big reason the Colts are going to be able to have put up points here. So I'm liking him quite a bit. Plus, correlation-wise, it makes sense to have Godwin and Pittman together. Just as a little bit of a mini game stack, so I don't feel too bad about that. Now, at this point, we could plug in our wide receiver 3, but I'm actually going to head over to defense because there's an obvious defense this week, and it's the Texans. I fully expect them to be the chalk defense of the week in cash games. I would be surprised if they're not like around 50% owned, which is crazy for a defense, but it just projection systems love them. My projections like them. It's just hard enough to plug them in. Anytime you get a cheap defense that's a favorite at home facing the Jets at this price point, you probably want to take. And the Texans have had a couple decent defensive games this year, fantasy points wise. So we'll plug them in at $2,300. That's going to leave us around $6,000 left for our last 3 spots, which is actually a decent amount of money. I don't think that looks too bad whatsoever. Let's just move to the tight end position. I'm going to plug in the cheap tight end of the week. He's grading out the best point per dollar wise. It's Jared Cook for me at $3,000. Not sure if I'm going to get a Charger in yet, but I do want exposure to this offense. It should be a decently high scoring day for the Chargers. They do have one of the higher implied team totals. He's only $3,000, and he actually gets decent targets. Like, it's not like we're hoping for a target or two with $3,000. He's 7, 5, 4, 3, 5 the past few weeks. Now, fantasy point wise, it doesn't always look amazing, but $3,000, that is hard to beat. I think he should probably be closer to $4,000, so I'm just going to take the value there. I'm not saying he's the lock tight end of the week, but he is very cheap, and he does grade out pretty well. So we'll plug him in, and that is going to leave us with $7,600 left for the last couple of spots. So you could do a lot of things with this. We could go with Brandon Cooks. We could go with DeAndre Johnson. If you wanted to spend up a little bit, we could probably get like a Deebo Samuel or Keenan Allen just to see what would fit. If we plugged in Deebo Samuel at $700, the wide receiver 3, we're left with guys like Jamar Chase, Mike Evans, Leonard Fournette, and a flex spot, which does not look that bad. If we went the Deontay Johnson route, which might be a little bit more of a balanced build at $6,600, that leaves you with $8,600 left for the last spot, which is guys like Devontae Adams, Austin Eckler, Justin Jefferson, Najee Harris, which sounds fantastic to me. I would have no problem with that. And if you wanted to go with Justin Herbert, you could probably upgrade Cam Newton here, and that should be able to get you a guy like Keenan Allen still, because that's $7,600. Keenan Allen 74. Yeah, I actually think that would look not too bad whatsoever. It's actually a pretty darn good looking lineup if you wanted to go that route. But just to stick with what we had, I'll plug Cam Newton back in. I'll take Deontay Johnson out. And if we wanted a J-Man CMC, he's very expensive. But if you wanted the pass catching option with Cam Newton, or just pretty much the best running back for fantasy purposes, just because of his receiving upside, like I know Cam Newton can vulture rushing touchdowns, but that's fine if he's going to throw the ball 8 times to CMC. Like the past 2 weeks, I know Cam Newton didn't play quarterback the whole game versus Arizona, but he's had 18 targets the past 2 weeks and 26 and 25 fantasy points. I think it's just fine plugging CMC in with Cam Newton, even in cash games. So if you happen to go that route, that's $6,200 left. You could play DJ Moore, but we already have a pass catching option with Newton. I don't want to get too many Panthers because that could just get a bit scary pretty quick. Jalen Waddle, Brandon Cooks. I wouldn't hate going with Brandon Cooks. You have Mike Williams, Elijah Moore, who's been fantastic, but already have the Texans defense. So just to plug in Brandon Cooks, I don't think it's a bad looking lineup. You got Newton, Robinson, Sanders, Godwin, Pittman, Cooks, Jared Cook, Christian McCaffrey, and the Texans defense. I will say it honestly looks a little bit more appealing to go the Deontay Johnson route and then get Devontae Adams in. I know he's going to see a lot of Jalen Ramsey, but like I always say, I would take the elite talent over a matchup any day, and I don't really care about wide receiver cornerback matchups at all whatsoever. So that doesn't look too bad either. Adams and Deontay Johnson honestly feels a little bit better than CMC and Brandon Cooks, but there's many ways you can go on the slate. You do not have to use this exact lineup. I would not recommend doing that. I would take a little bit more time on Sunday morning to get things finalized, wait for some more injury news out, but I probably won't be too far away from something like this. But make sure you guys apply this same process if you think it's pretty good and use it to your own favorite plays and build your own awesome lineups. But with that being said, I think that'll be pretty much it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, become a official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by Prize Picks, just you versus projections. And as of right now, if you're new sign over there, you can get a free money bonus up to $100 when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. But I think in a bit, I'll stop rambling. I wish you guys the best of luck, and I'll probably have my core plays video posted either on Sunday morning or late tonight. But I do wish you guys all the best of luck on Sunday.